Okay, so after leaving you guys on the cliffiest of cliffhangers, left you guys hanging like Sylvester Stallone, I figured I would go ahead and wrap up this story arc. Yes. Now, technically, this is the aftermath of the Invincible War, which I feel like I should change the title of the last video that we did, because technically it was called Invincible War. But this really just kind of gives us a few little tidbits and then like a massive fight, right? So kind of wrapping up from some of the stuff that we saw, right? The whole conflict with Invincibles kind of rampaging across the world and stuff like that. There's a few things that go on. For example, if you guys remember Russ Livingston, the astronaut that came back from Mars with the little aliens attached to him, he's still there. Right? And he was still living in that apartment. The whole place is trashed, and a couple of firemen come in to sort of clean the place out, and of course they get ensnared and they help him find a new place against their will, but they do it anyway. Immortal, who was basically killed, of course, is brought back, as you would expect with the Immortal himself. Mark is offered a position to kind of lead the Guardians of the Globe. Mark turns it down. He's like, he's injured, my mind's not in it, I have no desire to be a part of any of that or any of that kind of stuff. And so Mark ends up going out to basically deal with cleanup duty, right? To help remove a lot of the rubble and to help people out, stuff like that. But here's kind of an interesting thing, right? I don't know how many of you guys know this, but one of the things that happens when they have like major incidents like this, right? Huge buildings collapse, things like that. You can't just go in with like an auger, right? Or like a backhoe and just start digging up rubble. Because it could very well be that a 5-foot long 2x4 is the only thing keeping all that stuff intact. And if you pull that out, it'll all just come crashing down. And any survivors that might be there are killed, right? So you have to be super careful in terms of how you do it. That's why the process takes so long. So you wouldn't normally see a person doing what Mark's doing here, which is basically just grabbing giant chunks of debris and just throwing them out of the way. You wouldn't really see that process. But in the midst of Mark doing all this cleanup, there's a couple things to know. One, there's an exceedingly high level of guilt here. And a lot of this stems from the fact that he let Angstrom Levy live. And Angstrom Levy living is what led to all this in the first place, when Angstrom Levy just basically went around to all those different realities, grabbed all those versions of Invincible, brought them here, and then had them all basically go on a campaign to conquer the world and to smear the name of Mark in the hopes that of course Angstrom would help them conquer their own dimensions, right? Or find new dimensions to conquer, rather. And so Mark's feeling a lot of regret here, and where you would expect this to be a time when he could deal with all this regret and all this remorse, suddenly he's met by the arrival of a Viltrumite, who shows up here and says, I am your replacement. If you guys recall that discussion that he had with Anissa, she said, like, there's gonna be a Viltrumite who will come here. It could be 6 months, it could be 6 years, who knows? But they will come here and they will be appointed to replace you, to basically assess everything you've done. And if you have not conquered this world in the name of the Viltrumite Empire, or you're not on your way to doing so, they'll kill you and they'll take your place. And that's basically what this guy is, right? He's like, I'm here to take this place over by the Empire. At this point, Mark's not having it, man. Mark's like, no, look, I am in no position to listen to this man. Like, this is not a good time for you to come here with your little preaches about how you're here to fix my mistakes and refusing to conquer this world. And like, this guy's like, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, my name's Conquest. I have never failed to assimilate a chosen planet, no matter how strong it is. You can oppose me if you want to, but just know that if you do, you're gonna die, right? And Mark comes back with this amazing line, right? He's just like, ever since all this popped off, right? Like, this world that I care about, all the people on it, like they've been ripped to pieces multiple times, right? First it was my dad, and then it was various villains, and then it's all these marks from alternate realities that came here and all that kind of stuff. What I feel right now is anger, right? I feel guilt and I feel shame. And the only thing that I've thought about since all this has popped off, the only thing that I've wanted to do was hit something as hard as I can. Thank you for coming here, Conquest. You now have a purpose. And like a fight breaks out between these guys. Now, let me tell you something, man. This fight is brutal. I mean, it is intense. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I think it's more intense than the fight between Mark and his dad, right? Like, it was nuts, right? This fight was amazing. Now, as soon as this breaks out, right, Cecil's like, are you serious, man? Like, of all the times this could have happened, it's gotta happen now, right? Like, in the middle of all of this, it's gotta happen now. So here's a crazy thing. His scientific guy, right? The guy who was making like the Reaniman and all that kind of stuff, Sinclair, apparently what they've done is they've taken the bodies of the Invincibles who were killed and they're reanimating them. They're turning them into soldiers. Right now, it's taking a long time to do. But Cecil, man, this guy's always up to something, man. When we first started Invincible, I told you guys, Cecil, man, this guy's not to be trusted, right? Like, this guy's got problems. Like, he's a bad guy, right? He's got issues. Now, going back to Mark and Conquest, because that's honestly all you guys really care about here. Going back to Mark and Conquest, this fight is nuts, right? Because Mark's kind of punching him here and there and kind of getting the upper hand on him a little bit, or seeming to do that. And at the end, he's kind of like, okay, look, like it's one of these things where it's almost like this guy's kind of goading him on as they fight. He's like, you know, that's a good punch, right? It's cute. But the important thing here is Mark's like, okay, like he's doing everything he can against that guy, kind of fighting. But one thing to know, Mark's continuing to hold back. Mark is still still operating with this ridiculous assumption that heroes shouldn't kill people unless they absolutely have to, right? It's the last resort of a superhero. Like there's a time when it's just like, okay, look, this just needs to happen, right? Like there's no holding back. There's no, I got to pull my punches. I got to make sure I do the right thing and take the high ground because, that's what heroes do. And no. There comes a time when it's just like, you're a bad guy, time to die. And like, that's it. End of the road, right? Done. There's no slippery slope argument here. All you have to do is just create a code of ethics for yourself, which may include killing people, and create parameters whereby it is acceptable to kill people, right? And just because you're a superhero says, you know what, there are people, I kill people sometimes, doesn't mean you kill everyone all the time. Those are two distinctly different things, right? And one does not lead to the other. They don't have to, because you're a sentient, functioning human being. So here's the crazy thing, right? Like, while this whole great big huge fight's going on between Mark and Conquest, his mom, of course, is watching the whole thing unfold, but so is Oliver. And Oliver basically bolts off, right, to go hang out with Mark. Now, the crazy thing is, despite all this going on, Mark and Conquest are still too fast for Oliver, but he's doing what he can. Now, this is the biggest issue that Oliver has, right? Mark's biggest problem is he doesn't kill anybody even when he needs to, and even when it's the best choice to make. Oliver's problem is he's reckless. That's Oliver's problem. He'll just jump right into a conflict without giving it any real thought or any real measure as to what it is that he should be doing, or if he should even be here in the first place. Now, Mark tries to stop Conquest for a second, tries to reason with him for a second, but again, the failing of Mark, the desire to talk, the desire to reason, the desire to use words. And so Oliver steps in, and that's kind of the thing, right? As soon as Oliver jumps in, like, Conquest, like, who the heck are you? And he's like, well, it doesn't matter, don't worry about that. Oliver tells him his breath smells like feet, which is probably true. And so Mark's like, okay, right? Like, Mark sends Oliver out of there, says, you got to get out of here, you can't stay here. And that's when Conquest kind of chimes in. And that's the funny thing about this, right? That's the interesting thing about this. If you guys go back and like you watch the scene on Amazon when Mark fights his dad, or you read about it in the comics, his father is teaching him to fight as a Viltrumite while they fight, right? He's basically giving him lessons. He's teaching him what it means to be somebody who can basically face against all comers. And that's the whole philosophy. That's what it means to really be a superhero, is sometimes you just gotta kill. And that's the lesson that Conquest is teaching Mark. Now, he's not teaching it out of altruism, right? He's not here to be a mentor. He's here to kill the guy, right? Like, he's here to kill Mark. But it's an inadvertent lesson that's being taught to him, right? Mark tells Oliver, no, go, get out of here. The response of Conquest is, you idiot, you need all the help that you can get. Lesson being taught here, you can't always win on your own. And sometimes you really need to ask for help in these times when you're facing such an insurmountable threat that you just can't defeat it by yourself, right? The other part of this is he asks him, like, where's your Viltrumite heart? Until I see it beating in my hand, I won't believe that you have it. Show me your power. Show me your rage. Constantly pushing Mark. And that's been kind of the secret behind Mark this entire time. Mark holds back because he's trying to be the good guy. He's trying to be the good thing. He has not figured out yet that there are some points you just got to do the guy in. And fighting back against Conquest as best he can, when he goes in for a punch, Conquest catches his fist and says, if this is all the strength that you possess, this is not going to end well for you. So if you're serious about this fight, then fight like you're serious. But if you're not serious about this fight, let me know now. Put your guard down and I'll take you out, right? I'll kill you right here and now. And then as soon as I'm done, I'll kill everybody else, right? Like, my goal here is to prep this world for the arrival of the Viltrumite Empire, and I will achieve my goal, whether you're alive or not. And so you switch over to Eve for a second, right? Now, I told you guys in the early days when we were doing the Invincible run, Eve would become incredibly important and she would become astronomically powerful, right? She would become hugely powerful, so much so she would be the most powerful person throughout the entire roster of the Invincible comics. This comes when Eve wakes up, right? It doesn't come in this exact moment, but it starts when Eve wakes up. Now, she ends up seeing the TV. Mark's basically facing off against some crazy guy out there. Her mom makes a statement, well, Mark is fighting against his father, and she's like, okay. He's fighting against somebody out there. Maybe it's not his dad. I have no idea. Maybe it is. Who knows? But you kind of get this little bit of a back and forth, right? Where Eve's like, okay. She basically ends up, having the doctor get a hold of Cecil so Cecil can teleport her directly to where Mark is fighting, because obviously she won't be able to get there fast enough, or can't get there as fast as she would like to be. Her bones are broken, right? I mean, like, her leg's broken, she's got all kinds of injuries. She doesn't care, right? So from there, you switch back over to Mark, right? And again, Conquest is just kind of tearing into him and just kind of like really just goading him along the way. Like, this doesn't really, I mean, as much as it seems to be an even fight, and in some way it is, it's also completely uneven, right? I mean, one, like, Conquest looks older than Nolan, which means he seems to have lived a lot longer than Nolan has. Nolan's been around for a few thousand years, so Conquest Conquest seems to have been around longer than that. But he even goes as far as to say, like, I've met your father, right? Like, I never spent a whole lot of time with him, but like, I met him, right? He showed so much promise, and now he's dead, right? I heard his execution finally went off without a hitch, you know, and that's really sad, because I would love to have seen the look on your father's face when I told him I came to the world that used to be his, and I killed his son, right? Enter Oliver. Oliver comes flying in, just comes swooping in, right? Sends this guy flying, and then like the guy's right back on his feet again, right? And the whole time, Mark being an idiot is like, no, Oliver, you can't be here. Oliver, you gotta go. You can't stay, Oliver. You know, you gotta go. Be safe. And ultimately, like, Oliver gets picked up by Conquest. He starts to rip him in half. Mark responds and starts pummeling this guy. The dam breaks. Mark's had enough, right? Like, Mark is sick and tired of all this guy's nonsense. But even then, like, even him fighting, he's still not able to really put the marks into this guy to really pummel and beat this guy down the way that he needs to. Enter Adam Eve. Now, when Adam Eve shows up here, man, it's a sight to behold, right? It's one of the craziest things. So Adam Eve shows up here. She's like, you're not Omni-Man. And he's like, yeah, bad news for you. Mark steps in and tells Adam Eve, you got to get out of here, right? Like, Conquest breaks Mark's leg, goes after Adam Eve. Like, she creates a force field around him. He shatters the force field. He's like, girl, your problems are just beginning, right? Punches this girl in the face, boom, impales her through the stomach. That's the end of Adam Eve. And it's just like, wow, like, he just killed Adam Eve. Holy cow, right? Like, he just killed this girl. Mark's just like, what? You know, and this is it, right? This is the snap. This is it right here, right? This is the snap. This is the crazy thing about this, right? Here's the crazy thing about this. So Mark goes to comfort her, the dam breaks, right? Mark's just like, nope, done. Like we're not playing this game, because he starts to basically like make fun of it. And he's like, so she's finally dead? Damn, it took her long enough. She must have been a really great girl if she came all the way here just to die in front of you, right? You know, that's crazy. He's like, God, you know, her blood does taste delicious, you know, like literally just goading this guy, taunting him, right? And Mark's like, that's it, I'm done. Like, I don't care how strong you are, I don't care how fast you are, I've been to the future, and you don't live to see tomorrow. Like, you do not live to see the future. Mark completely snaps, right? Like, any chance this guy had against Mark is gone. These guys go flying towards each other. Mark shatters his robotic hand, so this guy is down one hand, and Mark just starts pulling this guy, and he's literally doing everything he can, right? He bites this guy. When I say bite, I mean he takes a chunk out of him, right? Like, takes a huge chunk out of him. Now, while all that's going on, Eve starts powering up, right? Just all this light energy just starts powering up out of nowhere, and then literally it's just this huge explosion of like a force of energy while Mark's just beating the crap out of Conquest. And then in this moment when Eve kind of flashes out, that she gets Mark's attention for a split second, and then you have Conquest who gets the upper hand on Mark, and then Eve completely reforms her body, blasts Conquest with all this energy, incinerates his skin on his body. Eve passes out. Mark takes the opportunity and just starts smashing this guy, right? Like, just headbutting him into oblivion, to the point that this guy's face is just absolutely mush, right? Just crushing this guy. And he's like, done, right? Like, that's it. Like I'm done. You know, like, Mark just snaps. You know, at that point, he gets over to where Eve's at, and Eve is like, am I naked? And he's like, yeah, you're kind of a little bit naked. And then Mark passes out, and Eve kind of passes out. But nonetheless, of course, Mark wakes up later in the hospital. Eve's at his side, and she's kind of like, oh man, you were so brave, you know, like, you fought that guy. Now, of course, there is the funeral for Rexplode, and this is kind of interesting, right? After Mark's recovering and kind of getting back, one of the things that does happen is he does meet with Cecil, and he's like, show me the body of this guy, right? Like, Cecil shows him the body, and he's like, okay, I just needed to know he was dead, right? After everything that happened with Angstrom Levy, he needed to know this guy was actually dead, right? Because he left Angstrom Levy for dead, only for Angstrom Levy to actually be alive and start unleashing holy hell with all these marks and everything. And so when you get to this kind of funeral between, or really with Rexplode, there's a lot that kind of goes on there, right? Like, you've got this whole thing with Eve where she's having a very difficult time with it, not necessarily because of the fact that she's deeply in love with Rex. A lot of this is because of the fact that he was her first, right? I mean, that's the thing. There's a kind of emotional bond that forms with someone when they're your first. She never got to say goodbye, and knowing that he died because he sacrificed his life to save others around him was something that she never thought that he would ever do, right? She always thought that he would always be a jerk. And so there's a little bit of remorse and regret here, you know, because she asked Mark, she's like, you know, can I say that I loved him? You know, is it weird if I say that? And Mark being a man of confidence is like, no, I mean, I wouldn't be mad about that, right? You know, if you're like an insecure guy, you'd be like, no, I don't want to hear you say that, because I'm afraid that you might, you know, reanimate his corpse and date him, you know, but he's like, yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like, I was your first, like, you guys spent a lot of time together. I mean, there was a bond there that you and he had that you and I just won't have, right? Because of the things, the parts of yourselves that you shared in a way that you'd never done it before. And so he's kind of like, you know, it's totally understandable that you feel the way that you feel. It's totally understandable that you're crushed like that. And so what you end up doing is you end up jumping to the block, which, as you guys know, is largely the prison that's kind of ran by Cecil. And of course, this is out in some defense outpost, you know, out in the Mojave Desert. and you've got Cecil there. And what you have there is the head of Conquest. In his infinite wisdom, what Cecil has done here is he showed Mark a fake body that was not actually Conquest. The body that Cecil showed Mark, that was not actually him. And instead, what's happened is he's put Conquest in a 400-ton block of solid tempered steel, and that Conquest is not actually dead. Like most Viltrumites, he's wildly durable. And of course, his healing factor's kicking in, and his body is basically healing. The intention of Cecil is that when he snaps back, right, when he comes back, that Cecil is going to basically interrogate Conquest, so Conquest will tell him everything he wants to know about the Viltrumite Empire. Of course, we will come back to that later on down the line. But this kind of ends when you have Mark having a conversation with Oliver. And this is cool, because as the two of them are talking, that Oliver's kind of asking about how Eve's doing and so on, and how Mom's doing, and basically Mark's kind of giving, you know, filling him in, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And then Mark expresses this deep frustration of the fact that he thought all this was over, right? He thought that like this was all said and done, that he could finally have some measure of peace in his life. And of course, the Viltrumites just keep on coming. And so when Oliver apologizes and he says, look, I'm sorry about everything that's happened, the response of Mark is, no, I'm the one who should be apologizing to you, right? The past few weeks, I've been training you. I think I've learned more than you have, right? I've scolded you, I've yelled at you, thought I knew better. I thought you were misguided and naive, but I was wrong. You were right the whole time, but I never learned my lesson. He says, someone tries to hurt my family, someone I love. If there's another villain out there putting lives in danger who's just gonna keep coming at me until they finally succeed, I won't hesitate to kill them. Mark has finally grown up. Mark has left this kind of wide-eyed childhood naivety behind and has accepted the world as it exists, and has accepted the fact that you can't always win with rainbows and hearts and love and shiny pretty things and a desire to understand other people's feelings. The world doesn't work that way. That the world can be harsh, and the world can be brutal, and it can be cruel. It's not always like that, but there are times when it is. And people who follow this philosophy that like kindness and happiness and understanding feelings is the way to make it in the world, they don't last, right? They cannot make it in those hard times. And so Mark understanding that philosophy, and Mark understanding there are times when I'm going to have to go to the limit, and there are times when I'm going to have to kill people, that's him growing up and accepting the way the world is. It's one of the coolest revelations of the entirety of the story. So with that being said, guys, thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.